What is going on, guys? We are back, and today we're going to be going over my top 10 tips and tricks when it comes to the Create mod. Now, as most of you probably already know, I have been playing with the Create mod pretty extensively for the past year or so, and in that time I have come across what I think are some very cool and very useful little features that do not get used very frequently, if I even see them get used at all. So I figured in today's episode we would go over what I think are the 10 most useful tips and tricks when it comes to the Create mod, in hopes that you learn a thing or two and can put some of these to good use in your world. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. So tip number 1 is that a bubble elevator placed behind a water wheel can allow it to produce additional stress capacity and run at higher RPM. Now, as you can see, I have two different water wheel setups in front of me. The one on the left here is generating 320 stress units at 20 RPM, and the one on the right is generating 256 stress units at 16 RPM. The one on the left is able to generate more stress units and run at a higher RPM because it's utilizing the bubble elevator in the back. As you can see, it's just a simple block of soul sand with two source blocks of water above it. And this is able to make it run faster because you are able to get water flowing in the correct direction on the fourth and final side that's typically left open with general setups. And this one right here is what I mean when I talk about that, as this is what is commonly thought to be the ideal setup, when in actuality, this setup on the left right here is the best way to min-max your water wheel. Interestingly enough though, if we take a look in our inventory at the water wheel, you can see that in its description, it generates 16 times the RPM for its stress capacity, and its maximum RPM should actually only be 16. So theoretically, this should not be possible, but it still is. So if you want to get your most bang for your buck out of a water wheel, definitely put a bubble elevator behind it so you can run it at 20 RPM and 320 stress units. Tip number 2 is that lava can be used in place of water when it comes to the water wheel. Now, this is going to be especially useful if you plan on setting anything up in the Nether, as the water wheel is one of the most commonly used power generation sources in the mod, and it's definitely not easy to set up a water wheel with water when you're working in the Nether. Now, unfortunately, you won't be able to make use of the previous tip since you cannot set up a bubble elevator in the back, but you're still going to be able to max it out at 256 stress capacity and 16 RPM using lava, and it can make a nice little aesthetic bonus in the overworld, even if you still have the option of setting it up with water. You just got to be careful because this thing can set some stuff on fire. Tip number 3 is that you can put filters, and so on and so forth to your heart's content. Now, this is important because if we take a look at a regular filter, we can see that it has a very limited number of filter slots available for whatever items you're attempting to whitelist or blacklist, and eventually this is going to become a problem because you're not going to have enough room for however many items you need. So an easy way to circumvent this problem is simply set the filters in whatever your first filter is, and then you'll max it out. You grab out a second filter, you open that one up, and you set the first filter that you just set as one of the filter slots in here, fill up the rest, set that one, and then you can continue going on and on until you have enough filter slots for whatever you're trying to set up. Tip number 4 is that brass funnels can be used as filters for inputs coming from the mechanical arm. Now, in this setup right here, we've got a mechanical arm that will be moving items from a depot into one of these two chests, and we're going to use brass funnels to filter whether the stone or cobblestone will go into each of these chests. So quickly, we can just set up the mechanical arm so that it has the input from the depot, and its output will be either to this brass funnel for the stone or to this brass funnel for the cobblestone, and you want to make sure that it is specifically set to the funnels, not wherever you are having the items eventually end up, like the chests or another depot or anything like that. We'll put it down, it's got the correct inputs and outputs, and then all we got to do is come over here, grab out a piece of each, and if we were to put the stone down, it'll pick it up and it'll put it into the appropriate chest, and if we put the cobblestone down, it'll do the exact same thing. Now, this is extremely useful because there is no other way to appropriately filter items that are coming from a mechanical arm if you've got multiple inputs and multiple outputs. Tip number 5 is that items like superglue and sandpaper that are introduced by Create can actually be enchanted with the Unbreaking enchant to increase their amount of uses drastically. So if we were to grab off one of each of these right here, we can grab out an enchanted book, and if we were to come into an anvil, we can easily enchant the super glue with Unbreaking 3, and we can also enchant the sandpaper with Unbreaking 3, which is definitely very useful if you plan on using these super frequently. Tip number 6 is that blaze burners have varying comparator outputs depending on their level of heating. Now, for those of you that do not know, there are 3 different heating levels when it comes to a blaze burner, that being superheated, heated, and warm. So if we start out in the back here and use a blaze cake on a blaze burner, it becomes superheated, and it gives us an output strength of 3. If we were to use something like coal or charcoal on a blaze burner, like we do right here, it becomes heated, and we get an output strength of 2. And if we were to use something like oak planks on a blaze burner, it simply becomes warm and we get an output strength of 1. Tip number 7 is that there is a maximum effective RPM to run mechanical drills at when you're using them with a cobblestone generator. Anything higher than 80 RPM and you will not get any additional cobblestone for the stress capacity that you are spending. Now I have one running at 80 RPM and one running at 256 RPM right now, and they've been running for quite some time, so to show you guys proof, we can take a look at these chests and see just how full they are. Now they're both almost completely full, but you can see that there's maybe a 1 or 2 block difference between these two chests, but that is over the course of almost an entire chest being filled up, whereas one of these is requiring roughly 300 stress capacity, and the other is requiring a little bit over 1,000. So if you want the most bang for your buck and not to waste a ton of stress capacity, then do not run these higher than 80 RPM when you're doing a cobblestone generator. Tip number 8 is that a minecart and cart assembler can be used to very easily relocate any spawner that you find in your world. Now this is done by placing a cart assembler directly below the spawner that you'd like to move, putting a minecart down directly below the cart assembler, and by giving a redstone signal to the cart assembler, the minecart is going to become a minecart contraption, and the spawner is going to become a part of that. As you can see, it's no longer actually a block in the world. Then all we have to do is get a wrench. If we right click on the minecart, we pick up the entire minecart contraption, and the spawner is now a part of this, so it's in our inventory. Then all we have to do is place back down the minecart with the spawner on top of it wherever we'd like with another cart assembler. And right now this currently has a redstone signal, but the minute we remove it, it is going to place the spawner back down in the world the same as it was when you picked it up. And this is a very easy way to make monster spawners or anything like that over by your base for XP, for items, and you don't need to worry about those stupid dark room traps anymore. You can just pick up a bunch of spawners, haul them back over there, and get crazy item and XP rates. Tip number 9 is that slime balls can be very easily made using a piece of lime dye and a piece of dough. Now this is extremely useful for 2 different reasons. Obviously, getting lime dye and dough is very easy early game, so it's way easier than going out and attempting to find slime somewhere, but it's also easy if you're just lazy, and even if it's late game, you still don't feel like going out and finding slimes. So all you do is throw these in a crafting grid together, and there you have a very easy source of slime balls, which are very useful if you're planning on using any form of linear or radial chassis, as slime balls are what are going to allow you to make those sticky to connect to other blocks. And finally, tip number 10 is that you can utilize a hose pulley and 10,000 source blocks to get an infinite supply of any fluid in the game. All you have to do is have the 10,000 source blocks placed where they are in contact with each other, and have a hose pulley that has the hose itself lowered all the way down to the very bottom of the 10,000 source block pool, and you'll be able to pull out an infinite amount of that fluid without draining any of the source blocks. Now obviously this isn't the easiest thing to do, but when you can get an infinite supply of any fluid you have access to in the game, it can be pretty overpowered if you're willing to put in the time and the effort to get there. So that is going to be it for today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed my top 10 tips and tricks when it comes to create. Be sure to let me know in the comments if any of these are new to you and if you plan on using them in your world. Also let me know in the comments if you like this format of video, because if you guys do, we can definitely do some more of these, whether it's with the create mod or with other mods. But that's going to be it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you learned something new and useful, and I will talk to you guys later.